512, good morning taxis, we hold short of hotel.
Okay, next presentation will be done by Kahlman and Han van der Meer. They will introduce themselves and let's see what we can talk about.
Good morning or good afternoon. Good morning. We'll start off with a little clip, and I do have to apologize that we have to switch the picture because this Apple computer doesn't understand that system. We'll start off with a clip and then.
A mob of cameras really crushing the man who leads Asiana Airlines as he arrived at San Francisco International. The Saudi president trying to express condolences, but he was forced back inside the terminal as reporters shouted questions. The biggest one, what happened inside the cockpit? The man behind the controls as Asiana Flight 214 crashed was the co-pilot, making his very first landing at San Francisco International in a 777. The NTSB says he had just 35 hours in that aircraft, far more junior than his supervisor, who had landed 777s at this airport 33 times. With no recorded distress calls before landing, part of the NTSB's investigation will be examining cockpit communication and culture.
We need to understand what was going on in the cockpit.
Communication in Korean cockpits raises an alarm to USC aviation safety professor Naj Mishkati, who has studied culture in cockpits for 2 decades. In the 80s and 90s, Korea's largest airline, Korean Air, suffered a series of accidents, including Flight 801 in Guam in 1997. The airline was criticized for its authoritarian culture in the cockpit. Then, in 1999, Korean Air Cargo 8509 plunged into a village near London. The investigation later revealed the junior officers were so deferential to the captain that they failed to speak up before it was too late. Social hierarchy and deference to elders is paramount in Korean culture. While Korean aviation today has safety standards rated among the highest in the world, Mishkati says hierarchical cultures can lead subordinates to stay quiet even in the face of safety problems.
If you have that cultural norm that doesn't help or it's not conducive to this type of a behavior, then you cannot have an appropriate level of the questioning attitude, which is a requirement for safety culture.
The unspoken rules of Korean culture may also help explain this curious comment by Asiana 214 flight attendant Yoon-hee Lee. Immediately after the plane stopped skidding after the crash, Lee went to the captain. I knocked on the cockpit door, she says. The captain opened it and I asked, "Are you okay, Captain?" And he said, "Yes, I'm okay." I asked, "Should I perform an evacuation?" And he told me to wait. It is important to note that we don't know exactly what happened in the cockpit. We will.
Okay, we're going to start off with introducing my colleague, and after that I will introduce myself to you guys.
Okay, my name is Han van der Meer. It's there, I think. I did Technical University in Delft, industrial design. Later on I went to an engineering company and was in a very technical area, project manager and engineering manager. From there on I made a move to Martinair. First to a very nice department with very smart people, research and development. And then I made a rather peculiar change from the technical operational side to the human resource side, and I founded the Sims Academy that was all about competence management. So about the function house, about how to train, and also how to recruit people, the right people. So that I did for 3 years, and then via somebody I knew, I went to Martinair, and I became director of flight operations for a few years. And meanwhile, in all those organizations as a manager, I saw a lot of initiative going nowhere, a lot of energy in organizations, sport. So, and as a person with a technical background, I thought if you go from A to B, you do 5 steps and you're there. But in practice, of course, it's not that easy. So I decided to study change management and organizational development for 1.5 years. And what I learned is just to have patience. Change management, to change people, and of course, if you talk about safety and safety culture, just culture, you have to be patient. And you all know already, because it took a long while to get the human factor in safety really into the system of all people you work with. We still do hospitals, they are still quite new. They started maybe in 2005, 2008, and still they have some problems with this item. Well, after I finished this study, I was very charmed by the safety culture, of course, in the airline business. And especially because it's also focusing on the human factor of safety. So it's not all about the technical stuff, and also not about all the procedures and protocols, but also about human factor. And that is something that is not introduced in other areas where critical operations are important. So that's why when we started in 2011, we started our company, Yes Human Factors. And now we're here.
Okay, if I introduce myself, we're going to do it via an exercise. I think half the people know me. You can try this exercise, but the other guys or people who don't know me, picture this. You look at me and you have some kind of idea what I am, who I am. And I'll give you my resume step by step. And I want you to think what happens in your mind, how you think about me. All right? I'm 59 years old, 1978. I went to the military academy. Wanted to study aerodynamics or aeronautical engineering. And they said, well, your grades on high school are not that good at mathematics, so if you want to stay in the academy in the 2nd and 3rd year, you're not going to make it, or you want to become a pilot. I want to become a pilot, okay, go study psychology. I said, what? Go study psychology. So I studied psychology and business on the academy, and my thesis was human factor in military aircraft accidents. So 13 years flying fighters, also as an F-16 instructor. Did some work in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I went to the Royal Netherlands Defence College and I studied crisis management and change management, because Netherlands Air Force and also the Army had a big identity problem because the Berlin Wall, everything fell down, so where the hell is our enemy? So what are we going to do? And that was focused on people, change management, people management. So in 1994 I went to Kahlman Martinair, and that shows for Martinair. So, the point I want to make during this exercise is we're going to talk about culture and also a little bit about stereotyping. We all do that. Han is going to explain that later, how your brain or our brains work and what we think of people. So if you think back, you only saw my name, a bald gray guy standing here. and how does your opinion change about people? And it's the same with what happens when you meet your students. What happens when they behave at a certain point within the cockpit or in the classroom. And if you look at the clip where we started, in safety, culture is really a thing. But in training, it's not really a thing yet that we are that good at it. If you look at EASA, what they write about culture differences, it's not that much actually. And if you look at us, Martin and I did 747 training within Carbolux, 20 different nationalities. We do training in Leaseweb, 50 different nationalities. And not everybody is ready for the cultural differences if you train them, if you recruit them, okay? So here's my question. If you look at this, it's not to brag, it's just 36 years of showing off that I'm an old guy. What point in my career do you think I had the biggest issues with cultural differences?
When you went to civil aviation.
Yeah, maybe it's not the biggest problem, but there's a change, yeah? There's a change, yes. And now somebody else said, well, when you were flying out of Italy.
Yes, when you got married?
But
when you got married?
Well, in between the different presentations, you see my wife and my 2 daughters at home, and then you know that's why I'm talking so long over here. Because no, but flying out of Italy was not a big cultural issue.
When you became the co-owner of Yes Human Factors?
No, actually it was when I was chief pilot, 747. We got an expansion of 4 extra 747s, and I had, as chief pilot, I had old cargo pilots from the 74 Classic, and that's it. And then suddenly we had, I think it was 80 KLM pilots joining us, Martin, or was it something like that?
That was after my time.
And we had 767 pilots from Martinair, flying passengers. And it was 3 different cultures within one division, within 6-7 months. And actually that was in this whole career was my biggest stress. How are they working together in a cockpit? Because we got so many reports. Do you know what they're doing? Do you know what they are doing? Right? So that was, for me, being operational manager in the Air Force and later within KLM Martinair, one of the highlights. And the other thing was, I used to be in the boards together with him, and later Hayo followed me when I quit there. And we almost fired a guy because we didn't understand why his performance went from above standard, standard plus, to acceptable. And he didn't want to talk about it. There was no way in hell he would explain what his problem was. It was private, personal, and he wouldn't talk about it. Okay, so culture is a thing within training and within companies. I'm going to tell you, explain the goal of this presentation. And since you're all TRI theories, we're going to give you some definitions, scientific view on cultural differences. EASA uses Hofstede. Han will explain something about that. And we took the liberty to give some advice to FSC, to you guys and to trainees. And then we'll end up with a group discussion, if we have time, because it's a short time. Okay, the goal? So how to cope with stereotyping, ethnic and cultural profiling. And we all do that. Yeah, there's no problem. Han always gives the example. He loves Asian food, and he goes to a shop in Nijmegen, and he stands there on the street waiting for the cars, and there's this elderly Asian guy standing next to him, also to cross the street. there's no more cars, and he steps in and he lets this guy go first. Because he's assuming he's going to the toko, but the guy's going to the barber shop. And that's how it works. So within 30 seconds, we profile people, we stereotype people. Last October, November, Jacob called us and said, can you guys do some training for management pilots in Moscow? I don't know if there's a non-disclosure agreement or not, but I will not mention the company. So we said, yeah, we can do that to make them CRM instructors, EASA based. And so we talked with the head of training over there, with Chaco, what is their English proficiency, how are they doing, what's their education, etc. And we thought we were best prepared forever, right? We came there, first slide, yes, human factors, CRM instructor. Second slide, this is Han, this is JP. And third slide, we opened the slide and 9 out of 10 guys went tick, 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 on their phone. And I said, hey guys, what are you doing? What is behavior? They didn't know, right? It's not culture that they don't speak English that well, but it's culture that we weren't informed, okay? So if you get more insights, because of course FSC wants to give the best training that they agree with their customer. If you get more insight in possible cultural differences, it might help you within the simulator, or within the cockpit, or within the classroom. That makes sense, right? Don't know if you know this. This is about
Lots of
stereotypes.
cultures eat rice. Doesn't help me. Shalom. I'd like to apply for a loan.
That's nice, Dwight.
Okay, do me something stereotypical so I can get it really quick.
Okay, I like your food.
Outback Steakhouse. I'm Australian, mate.
No.
Pam, come on. I like your food. No, come on. Stir the pot. Stir the melting pot. Bam. Let's do it. Let's get ugly. Let's get real.
Okay. If I have to do this, based on stereotypes that are totally untrue, that I do not agree with, you would maybe not be a very good driver.
Oh man, am I a woman? I thought that would be too explosive. No pun intended. But I just thought too soon for Arabs. Maybe next year. You know, the ball's in their court.
What was it?
Chappelle Show?
Really?
Yeah. I downloaded it on her computer. I hope she doesn't mind. She just had a lot of extra
No
stuff.
way, no. I think she really likes this stuff.
Great. She's cute, huh?
Yeah, she's engaged.
Oh, no, the girl in the sketch.
Oh, yeah.
She's hot. Yeah.
Hey,
Hey.
you want to go to the beach?
Sure.
You want to get high?
No.
I think you do, Mon.
Stop.
Okay, all right, no, all right, it's good. You need to push it. You know, you need to go a little bit further. All right, okay. Kelly, how are you?
I had the longest meeting.
Oh, welcome to my convenience store. Would you like some googie googie? Well, I have some very delicious googie googie, only 99 cents plus tax. Try my googie googie. Try my googie googie. Try my googie googie. Try my... All right.
So what do you see in this clip? Yeah, culture. Yes, stereotyping.
Miscommunication.
Miscommunication. Yeah. Because a lot of stereotyping, we do it all the time, and we don't think it's that big of a problem, right? Unless you also expect the guys, the student, your trainees, to be like that, what you think of them, right? Because they answer you in a wrong way, or they don't respect the way you talk to them. Han is going to point out, if you look at power distance index within cultures, if I say something as a teacher, some cultures they say, he's right. If I say that wall is black, the wall is black. And in our culture, for example, if I say, I don't know the answer to your question, in Holland it's accepted. When I say, I'll get back to that later after the flight or after the briefing or tomorrow. But in other cultures, it's totally not accepted. You need to know, or you're not a good trainer or instructor. And it's handy to know that on forehand. Okay? Some definitions on culture. So please look at these 3 definitions. So what strikes you if you look at the definitions?
It's the third one, that the culture manifests itself in different ways in organization.
Yes. Yes. Anything else?
Stable over time.
Sorry?
Stable over time.
Stable, yes.
It continues.
It's not something you're born with, culture, correct? So it differentiates one group from another. So it really means that when we were in Moscow, that group of people is really different than I was. Even though we had one common denominator, and that was flying. Because those guys love to fly, I love to fly. But that was for 70% about it. Yes? Yeah?
I believe only the first one can be seen as a definition. 2 and 3 are rather weak as definitions.
Okay.
Why do you think that?
The definition tries to really cover the whole item. And 2 and 3 are only
A description.
defining
Yeah.
aspects.
I agree. Sorry?
I think the third definition is the best one for us as an instructor to work with, because it's always a manifestation. So, despite the culture you are from, it's the manifestation. So you can, in the training environment, you can say, well, how shall we do? What shall we do? And you can come up with an agreement
Exactly.
about how you instruct, how the training should work, despite the culture.
Yeah. The other thing is that what I just gave you as an example when I was chief pilot with Martinair with the 3 different groups of pilots coming in, that's not this culture, right? Then we're talking about organizational cultures, which is, for us, it's about the same, because it really doesn't matter as long as we know that there's differences between groups of people, right? And we also have personality differences between personalities, and that's not the same as over here, okay? So this is what they see as culture in the definition, in the meaning. It's programming of somebody's mind, where you live and how you were raised in that certain spot. So when we were in Moscow, I mean, big country, Russia, they said, oh yeah, we have a lot of different cultures here. Everybody's Russian. You had to be Russian to be in that company. But the guys from Siberia were totally different than from Caucasus or from Moscow itself. So they had issues with that as well, right? And then we said, so what do you do with it? Actually nothing. We have one format and that's how we teach. And does it work? No, not that good. And that's about the same challenges that FSC might meet with your customers or with their customers. But then we mentioned, or Han mentioned it very shortly, just culture. If you take this definition from Eurocontrol, actually in every definition, also from the FAA or EASA, I like this one as one of the best because it says you cannot blame people for something that they're not trained for or where they're not have the experience for, but also you cannot blame them for culture. If somebody has a certain culture, don't blame them if they act not what you expect to see, right? Because they don't do it on purpose, it's just how they were programmed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So when we sorry.
Wouldn't training, as in this definition here, be one of the elements of training be culture awareness?
Yes, I think so.
So then you don't need culture, because then in fact at the end of training everybody's groomed to a certain standard, whatever the standard is.
Yes.
Including culture and awareness of culture.
That's true, but then in this case probably FSC as the auto should train you guys to do something with cultural differences, right? Then you can implement it in training, and I totally agree, you should do that. Because at the end, nobody is an instructor or an examiner likes that he has to fail somebody or say the training session was not satisfactory at all. Why it could have been satisfactory or above standard or standard, whatever, when you would have known. So, I don't know if my wife asked for a non-disclosure agreement, but she does a master's study now in education. And in the Dutch education system, they are busy with this for the last 10, 15 years about cultural differences. And why is that? Because we have a lot of people coming from the outside. We have that already for 50 years, but now they're doing this for 15 years now. In companies, if you look at Shell or Vopak, where we are training as well, or where we talk to people, they are talking about diversity, inclusiveness, and cultural differences. But I don't think we talk about it enough within airline training. Okay? Maybe within Emirates they did it a lot, I don't know. I know that in Hong Kong they just say it's the British way or no way, right? In the beginning. I don't know if it's still like that. Cargolux, they just said, well, we put another rule in that's acceptable for him, and we put another procedure in for that. And they said, how the hell should we cope with this? Yeah, so we need to talk about something like that. And so I really like what you said in the beginning. It's procedures, techniques, but you need to have a set of standard procedures if you have a lot of cultures that you're training. And the other thing is, really important, is does the, no, I'll say that after I'm finished. I'll do that later. Thank you.
Yeah, who's familiar with this item, the dimensions, the 6 dimensions of Hofstede? Who knows? She does. Not that many people. Okay. Okay. This is interesting. It's a Dutch psychologist, which is a coincidence, but he did a study in different countries. So we're talking, of course, personal differences. Also in the ESA guidelines, they have a chapter about personal differences, and you have cultural differences. So that's a difference. Eh? So we were talking earlier, somebody talked about being a man or a woman or whatever, also in the clip. That's a difference. Age is a difference. Experience is a difference. So you have all kinds of differences, personal differences. And maybe you recognize that if you have if you are very good at something, so for example you're very creative, you might be allergic to people who aren't. Yeah. So you have to take that in consideration also as a trainer. Everybody has good stuff, but also is allergic to other people's personal behavior. Yeah. This is about culture, and culture you can see it as an organizational culture, but also of course country culture. And this is about country culture, so make the difference. If you want to study this, because I will be very brief with this item, you can also study on the website. It's a fine website where you can find all kind of information about this item. I will go into two of those dimensions, but this is what it's about. You have power distance. I will go into that. GP also talked about it. Power distance is about hierarchy and the acceptance of hierarchy. Yeah. You have, of course, individualism and collectivism. So maybe you recognize that some people are more acting as an individualist, and some people are more into social behavior. Yeah? So, of course, you know the difference between the Asian people and the Western people. Yeah? It's about taking care of the community or taking care of yourself or the others individually. Yeah? Masculinity and femininity also might come up with some ideas right away if you see this. But this is about being tough and about being tender. Yeah? Different countries have different ways of looking at masculinity and femininity. So some countries are more feminine and some countries are more masculine. And I suppose sometimes it's very obvious, but also it's very subtle. So you can come up with countries who are very masculine. Can you come up with an example of a masculine country? USA? Right. Can you come up with a country that is very feminine? Holland. Sweden. Even more. Even more. Now on this website, you can compare different countries on different items. It's very, very interesting to just have a look. Yeah. Then you have uncertainty avoidance. This is about how you manage or perceive risk. Yeah. Also, there's a difference between the countries. I will come up with an example later. Yeah. And then you have long-term versus short-term orientation. Yeah. For some countries, they are more focusing on short-term items and other more on long-term items. Yeah. So about the strategy on the long term or the strategy on the short term. And then you have indulgence versus restraint. Some countries they like the personal freedom and they act based on freedom. They are very strict in the rules or the procedures or the norms. Other countries are. So these are just a way of looking also at your students. Yeah? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So just an example. This is about power distance. So this is not only about hierarchy, but also about accepting. Accept it. So here we can talk about dominant behavior, but also non-assertive behavior. So for example, in the hospitals, we think sometimes in the operation room you still have a hierarchy. You have those specialists, the anesthetist, the nurse, and there's still a hierarchy. And it's very subtle. So a lot of people focus on the specialist. They are very dominant. And sometimes it's very subtle. So they're very dominant. But also we see a lot of non-assertive people. People who are, on the other hand, not able to express themselves if they have concerns. Yeah? So still they are also. So it's also justification for hierarchy. Some countries you need to explain hierarchy. Can you come up with an example where you have to explain hierarchy?
India.
India?
India.
You have to explain the hierarchy? You have to
have different levels of people. The rich ones and the normal ones.
Yeah.
When you get them together, the rich ones is always overpowering the normal ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very difficult to explain them to the so-called rich one, but you are here doing the same job.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So there's still, I think, some acceptance of this.
Yeah.
I know it's a discussion also there. But we had in this Leaseweb, this is an IT company in Amsterdam, and we trained there, and we had 2 Indian guys, and they were very social and talking to each other. And then they were in the cockpit, and one of the guys was doing something wrong. He was slapped. So we were thinking, what's happening there? But this was also the case of the hierarchy. So that's true. But in some countries also they accept this hierarchy more than in other countries. Where don't they accept hierarchy? We don't accept hierarchy. If there's hierarchy, you have to explain.
More or less all the Western world.
All the Western world. But even there you can compare in this thing on the website. You can compare countries. It's nice to have a look at it. Okay. So what does this mean? What does this mean for learning? You think? What does this mean for learning?
Obstructing the learning.
Yeah. Where does it obstruct the learning?
Because the ability to be open to other people, and a lot of people will shut down because they're not allowed to listen or to speak up.
Yeah.
And that's
For example.
Yeah, for example.
Yeah. And also, if you, as a teacher, if you discuss a certain item as though you're not the only one to know, then in some countries they think you're not the expert. You have to know because you are the teacher. And so that's something to take in consideration. So the way you form a learning, if you look at a higher power distance, you have to be very formal in your learning. Yeah, you have to explain and tell people what to do more than another surroundings. So informal learning, so going into discussion about a certain item, you cannot do that all the time. You have to be in balance there. Also supervisors has a negative relationship with the way you learn people. Yeah. So this is just about power distance. Yeah. Next one. I will explain too. This is about masculinity and versus femininity. So please read. This is also about being competitive or working more in cooperation. Yeah. So this also influences the way you teach or act in the cockpit. So how do you think this influences the work in the cockpit?
Too easy to accept.
Hmm?
Too easy to accept.
What do you mean by that? Too easy to accept?
If the one makes a mistake, the other one just, yeah, okay, let's carry on with it.
Yeah.
Without actually acknowledging what we've gone wrong or whatever.
Yeah, okay.
So, oh yeah, okay, let's carry on with it.
So that's too tender, you mean?
Yeah.
to tender. So also, of course, you have to balance. When I was at Siemens, we had a course about managing diversity. And then later on, I got in contact with Shell, and they had a better definition because they were talking diversity, but also inclusiveness. So I think in your professional job, the thing is to look at inclusiveness. So there's a common goal, not depending on where you come from or where you go to. So if you fly a plane from A to B, sometimes you have all those procedures and protocols and all those technique around you, also in the operation room in the hospital. And sometimes the world we live in is very complex. And also when you're flying, it's a complex world. A lot of parties, a lot of technique, a lot of procedures, a lot of protocols. Before you know, those protocols and procedures take over and the system takes over. Yeah. But it's all about the purpose. What's the purpose for a pilot flying from A to B? What's the purpose?
Safe operation.
To be safe. So everything you do has to be in order to be safe. Yeah? So also protocols and procedures are very important, but always supported in our opinion. Always supported. Technique, always supported. Yeah? At the end, you, with your team, decide what to do. And we say you can divide from protocols and procedures, but you have to do two things. That's one, you have to explain later. You have to have a good story to explain why you did that. And the other one is never do it on your own. So consult your co-pilot or your team member or whatever. The world is too complex to put it in protocols. And the thing is, I was talking just now with people about risk taking and about taking risk. And the thing is, in your job, you have to be right all the time. You cannot be wrong 1% of the time. I was in 2011, I was at a hospital, and they told me that they introduced the top timeout procedure before every operation, just in 2008. Before that, in 2007, 6 times they operated the wrong side of the body. And as a potential patient, I was almost on a white chicken. I think, what's happening? 6 times. And one of the specialists said, well, we're doing 20,000 operations. So what's happening? What's happening? That's the wrong mindset. It's a mindset. In your job, you have to be right all the time. Yeah? And we all know sometimes it goes wrong, but you have to be right all the time. So don't rely blindly on technique or procedures or protocols. Use your team.
You mentioned the timeout procedure.
Timeout procedure.
Can you explain a little bit about it?
Sorry?
Can you explain a little bit about it?
They just check in front of every operation. Normally, before that, the specialist would go into the operation room, started operating. Now they check if the right person is there. If they're doing the right purpose, if they're doing the right operation, if there is might be some allergic issues, or if they have eaten something or whatever. They have just a checklist. It's just a checklist before they operate. Even now they have also time out procedure, after a sign out procedure after the operation, which isn't going too well.
How's it called? Shine out?
Sign out.
Sign out.
So you have time out procedure, sign out procedure. Yeah? Okay. So this is about tough versus 10. And the other 4, you just have to look at the website and you can find interesting stuff there. Just to compare. And this is one of the comparing issues. What we did when we were in Moscow, we compared Russia, China, and the Netherlands. And if you look, for example, at power distance, you can see what happens there. There's a lot of power distance in Russia, in China, less in USA, and then at least in the Netherlands. I won't go into that further. Masculinity, Russia, is quite okay. A lot of masculinity in China, more than average. In the USA and in the Netherlands, less. So it's not, sometimes it's very obvious, but also it's very subtle sometimes, and you really have to take care that you recognize it if you are teaching. Okay? Any questions left? Maybe later on, during lunch?
We got 20 minutes left, so we're going to be a little bit swift about this.
JP, you can extend a little bit more, there's no problem. We can go to 12:30, it's no problem.
Okay. Average age is about 5 years below my age. So if you look, remember this crash. Is there anything going on about culture here in what happened over there?
Yeah.
Yes, what was going on?
It was the beginning of the KLM culture after this for flight safety.
Yeah, so it's an organizational culture.
Yes, yes, so that's one.
Yeah. So the thing is that, of course, there's 99,000 of good examples in that organizational culture, but sadly enough, we always talk about the incidents or accidents. But the thing is that you need to be aware as an organization or as a training department, be aware of what is happening in the cockpit, in the culture. So if you look at, that's what I said, I'll come back to that later, how are we going to cope with that as an instructor? Well, first, FSC. What I would advise FSC to do with regard to what happened to us in Moscow, you need to look at cultural differences between your customer and what you are going to train here, right? What are the demands of the customer? Do they want EASA, CRM, same level as what we like to do and practice over here in the Netherlands or in Western Europe? And what we need to do then is tell the instructors what the difference is, what they can expect. So be prepared, right? That's the thing. Because for me, it is really threat management. It is a threat for the total outcome of the training that you give. I mean, if they don't want CRM, no problem. But if they want CRM and they have a high power distance index, it's as simple as that, then you need to talk and address about it. You need to talk about it and you need to address it. Yeah, about the gradient in the cockpit between the captain and the co-pilot. When we went over there to that company, we were allowed to sit in the simulator, a grass simulator, and there was nothing coming from the right seat to the left seat. He did say totally nothing. And I asked the instructor, so is this normal? Yeah. The other thing is, and it's an organizational culture, this company has such a big shortage from pilots that they accept pilots, they hire pilots who are probably not capable of becoming a captain. So their recruiting process is, he needs to be a good pilot, and that's it. Well, in Western Europe we think differently about it. We, at Martinet, Transavia, we like to recruit people who can progress to being a captain. But that's something you need to know. Because this guy is sitting there with his competence, and he doesn't know about that it's necessary to talk to the left guy if he doesn't agree or if he thinks it's dangerous, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned the cockpit as well, the grading, and you see it quite often in Russia, for example. But do you believe truly that you can train that out of crew?
No, I think you need to know, but I'll come to that later. But I think you need to know that it's there.
Yeah, of course.
Because otherwise you're gonna, what he's saying, and I mean, training and checking, it's very hard to
We introduce CRM quite a lot, obviously, here, and it's trying to filter across to Eastern countries. But do you truly believe that you can change that?
I think it will take one generation, but you can change it. But it's going to take a
You mentioned
generation.
earlier on,
Yeah.
it's got to be stable. It has to be introduced through generations.
Yes,
And that's
but
what it was.
the thing is, he studied change, organizational development. I had to do with it, to deal with it in the Air Force. But the thing is, you either need a crisis, a big crisis, and it's happening there, right? Turn the camera off, please, but it's happening there. And the reports are, what we heard, he was stuck with his sleeve behind the truss levers, but they all wear short sleeves, but it was in the report. So, I mean, it's very hard to change that. But you need a crisis or very good leadership. Well, and if the power distance index is like this, and if the culture is something, then you are missing one or both.
What I'm trying to say is that we're obviously going into this quite pressure with external factors being in place to try and change this, but as just TRIs seeing these people firsthand, it's very difficult for us to introduce this.
No, I totally agree.
How do we then address it? Do we address it from the right-hand seat upwards, or do we address it from the left-hand seat downwards?
No, I'll tell you later what I think and what EASA thinks.
Okay.
Yeah?
Both.
Sorry.
Well, I think as an instructor, you cannot change the culture,
No.
but you can create a training environment where you can discuss, okay, now we're going to try to see if the co-pilot can talk to the captain. So, and then you make it very simple and give them some exercises.
But you only see one crew at that point.
Yeah.
So that will change as soon as we get trained as well. But what I'm trying to learn here is that what are we doing behind the scenes to implement this change over generations? Because if we don't do it now, it will continue.
No, what I would do is to manage expectations of customers and to manage expectations of trainees and manage your expectations as an instructor or examiner, is you need to address it before you start training with this certain company from the North Pole, whatever, right? You need to address it and know and tell your instructors what they can expect, but you can also tell the company, hey, listen, we cannot, that's what we ended up, we cannot say that you're EASA certified. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to put my signature underneath it. Even though EASA really doesn't care, but I thought it's my name or our name. But you're right, it's not going to change with an instrumental lesson.
It can be very difficult for us because I've taught students for Lion Air. We get 2 co-pilots and they go to Lion Air and they get a culture shock when they get there because the local captains don't got.
That's true.
How can we teach them that you have got the guts to decide?
Again, for me, that's leadership. And it's a thin balance for FSC, make money, or say, well, what you want is not what we can do in 12 sessions. Because if you do not train in teams, and we see the same, and I'm not going to talk about hospitals and surgeons all the time, but we would like to train in teams because then the surgeon will see that the OR assistant can have a very valid input. But if the surgeon says, "Oh, we'll do it later, we'll go into the simulator later," just with the surgeons.
I'm not talking about
No, but that's...
European going to that country. So they have got no idea about the culture over there.
That's true.
And how can we actually get them ready and say, look, you're going to fly with people who've got a completely different culture, way of thinking. But
I think if it's part of your portfolio as FSA, you should put it in there. Because for me, if you talk to airlines or if you talk to management of airlines, I have a friend who's helping me now. He used to be in the board of SkyTeam. And he's telling me that, oh yeah, I totally agree with you, but 15 years ago they didn't. So, but they have to know that. So you can train the co-pilots here, in a certain way with hierarchy and gradient within the cockpit, but if it's not over there, then you need to tell the customer, we do it here over here, but they're going to be shell shocked when they get over there, right? But, okay. Let's talk about this for a second.
So you all, of course, know the term shared situational awareness. I do. Yeah. Okay. So we think about it in 3 steps. So you want to have, of course, within your cockpit a shared situational awareness. We think of it in 3 steps. One is about judgment. So you have your reality, I have my reality, outside there's a reality, we want to have it overlapped. Yeah? So we think of it in 3 steps. This is the first step. How do you come to your reality? We all live in our own bubble. Yeah? So this is what we call the ladder of inference. So, of course, we have a lot of reality and facts around us. Yeah? And we select enormously. So, I always ask people, if you walk to a shopping mall for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes I ask you, what did you see? What did you see, you think, in general?
People, 10 different stories.
Everybody sees everything different. Everybody sees something different. And if you're a man, you're looking at different shops than when you're probably a woman. When you're elder, you see different things than when you're younger. So everybody selects enormously. And what you remember is that what is intensive to you, so what has your interest, what you feel, that's what you remember. When it comes up with the strongest feeling. And what you remember is the last thing you saw. That's what you all remember. And how much do you think we consciously remember from everything that happens? From all the inputs we get?
0.5%.
Huh?
0.5%.
Probably. Less than 1%. The rest is gone there. So a lot of information already is gone there. So, and the thing is, different people see different things, so you have to take care of everything that people see. Yeah? Then you get into the interpretation. And here's culture, also a very important thing. You select some facts, and then you make your own interpretation. And this interpretation is based on if you are a woman or a man, it's based on your age, also on education you have, but also on culture. So you have different facts and you see different things. Then you make into assumptions. You go into assumptions. Then we, in organization, to assume is the mother of all fuck-ups. You know, to assume is the mother of all fuck-ups. Now this definition? Well, you assume all day. Luckily you do. Why? Why is it good to assume all day? What happens if you don't?
You don't make progress.
Yeah, you don't make progress.
Stuck.
No. So I always go to a light switch and then I say, what happens if I switch this light switch? What happens? Lights go on or out. And most of the time all those assumptions are right. Yeah? And if it's not right, the outcome is not that severe. Yeah? But when it's getting critical, then it's important not to assume. Only when it's getting very critical. So be relaxed about making assumptions. So don't make assumptions when it's very critical. Then you have your conclusions and your beliefs. About assumptions, if you are on a crossing and you see a Fiat Panda have a collision with a Mercedes Benz, and in this car there's a guy with his head backwards, and in the other guy in the Fiat Panda, there's a granny. What do you think?
Granny's fault.
Granny's fault.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Yeah.
guy drove by. All kind of assumptions right away. Yeah. And if you ask 4 people on this crossing, what did you see? They all saw something else. Yeah, because of all their assumptions. So of course in the courtroom they are taking care of this issue. It's very difficult and it's very quick. Yeah. So how quick do you think you are up the ladder?
Seconds.
Seconds, just seconds. Yeah. Okay. And then you are on top. You believe something, and then you are in the reflexive loop or tunnel vision. What happens if you are on top? You believe something very strongly. What happens?
You will behave accordingly, or take action accordingly.
You act on your belief, of course, but what you also see, you only see the facts that support your belief. If you go into the refugee discussion, you have people who say, well, you're welcome, and other people say, please stay in your own country. And they all have their own facts. And maybe the facts are okay, but it's just a small part of the facts. So it gives a very not solid view of what's really happening. Yeah? So this tunnel vision is very important. I have one friend working at the police department, and they're taking care of this. So one of the people in the team is taking care of this. So all proof, because if you suspect somebody, you're looking for facts that support that all the time. Then you are in tunnel vision. So that one guy was questioning all the proof that's on the table. It's his role, and everybody knows it. Yeah? So this is what happens. So what you have to do is, if you are very convinced of something, please go down the ladder. And if you see other people being very convinced of something, please investigate. Don't judge right away. You judge, you can help it, but keep it for yourself and just first investigate. What's happening here? What do you see? Why do you see it? Yeah? Okay, this is the first step about judgment. The next step is about effectively communicating about how you judge. And the last step is to come to a decision with your team.
Okay, so this is rather a pain in the ass, right? Because we all do this, also about our students. We just do this, right? So, what do you need to do as a TRI with these cultural differences? Yeah? You just need to be aware that there are cultural differences that you will not change within 5 sessions. Yeah? You need to familiarize yourself with these cultural differences. For example, if you know that in this culture, this co-pilot will not talk back at this captain, you need to know that, because otherwise we're going to grade or check them on it, right? Do not assume, right? If you see this letter of inference by this neuropsychologist, Argylis, that's his name, by the way, Professor Argylis, we do that, right? What you need to do, according to EAS, is discuss cultural differences. Don't make it personal with your students. Don't say, you do this. Yeah, just discuss it in open questions. And you need to emphasize on standard and safe operating culture. So this is a meta, high-level answer on your question. But you need to, because all pilots want to be safe. There's no question about it. But it's the way that you facilitate that discussion within the debriefing or in the briefing, that these guys both start to accept that he needs to talk, be more assertive, and the other guys need to create an atmosphere in the cockpit that he's allowed to talk, right? Does that a little bit answer your question? And then you have to start with the people who want to change, yeah, and then it will happen. That's what we saw in that company in Moscow. They wanted it. They said we need that, but 1,200 pilots, and we only talked to 20 of them, right?
It's a start.
But it's a start. So what is the suggested technique? And now we come back to this. Who does not know this? I learned about this in 1996, flying F-16s, they talked about it. Everybody knows about this? So what about the danger zone? Why is that the danger zone?
It's a shared zone.
It's a non-communication zone? Yeah. Why don't you communicate in that zone?
Because it goes to a comfortable. It feels uncomfortable and maybe one doesn't know if it's really a problem or not, and you think that it tries to open the speech or whatever the problem is or whatever.
Okay, I think it's a little bit different, but maybe we mean the same. Why is this called the safety zone up there? Why is it called the safety zone?
Of course, your reality meets real reality, and in the other case, the danger zone, you're both not in the real reality. So
Exactly. And what is it?
together? So together you assume something which is safe, which is actually not safe.
And what happens then? Or what does not happen then? And he just talked about it.
Confirmation bias.
Accidents or...
Yeah, you don't talk about it.
No, that's what I mean, yeah.
So you don't talk about what you agree on, because when you agree on something, you're not going to talk about it. So what do we do to solve this problem? His story this morning. What do we do?
Share information.
We get reports, right? And then you put it in a checklist. So everything, when I as a chief pilot find out that in Quito this happened, and in Quito it happened again, okay, we might have to change the checklist there, or the procedure for that. Yeah? Because then it's a structural issue. If you agree on this part of reality, which is not true, you don't talk about it anymore. And then you need something, software, hardware, checklist, procedure, doesn't matter. That's what you put in the checklist. Right? That's why a checklist is not a fixed thing, because it might change. If you get better software, you can take it out of the checklist or not. Okay? So this is what I was taught to do, and which I really agree to. If you talk about cultural differences, the 3 steps to get this safety zone as big as possible is what Han just explained. So we have 3 guys in the cockpit, in the simulator, and you as TRI, you make the purple reality, right? You set the scenario, so you know what's going to happen. Now you want these 2 guys to have the biggest safety zone as possible, right? They need to talk effectively about what they see, about the facts that they see. Then you get the overlap, and then you need to come to a decision. So when I make a scenario, I know what the scenario is, I'm just going to look at these 2 bubbles. Is one going away from reality? Is he out of there? And what is the reason why he's not aware of that reality? Yeah? Is he not explaining things? Is he not talking? Is he not aware that he's not there? So that's how I try to get the biggest safety zone. And that's how I can really evaluate what's going on. Yeah, so if you see one of these 3 circles, this one going out there, think about what is the reason. Maybe you need to ask some questions. And don't tell them it's wrong. Ask a question, what's happening here? What is the situation now? And then, what is the reason for that? Is it a cultural thing? Is he not effective? Is he not effective? So I always look at 3 bubbles. Are they coming to this purple bubble that I just put in the computer? Does it make sense? Yeah. Yeah? So if you look at CRM, and then again, FSC needs to know if the customer wants to be trained according to EASA CRM. And they need to tell you. Because if they don't want that, and they just want you to tell them what the procedures are, what the techniques are, or how to fly an ILS, that's it. Then you don't train them on CRM, or you don't grade them on CRM. So don't make it personal. Yeah? Focus on common traits and behaviors that are perceived, what you see. And it has to be, for me, it has to be observable behavior. What are the effects and the challenges in that behavior, and what can you be doing? And it should be focused for both parties, and they will understand safe and standard operation. But there's ownership for the trainees as well, right? So if you inform them before that, as a company or as FSC, tell them this is what you can expect from the instructor, this is what you need to learn, and this is where you were trained in, and this is not where you will be trained in. Okay, that makes it much easier for you guys. Much easier. And in the briefing, just address it. We're not going to talk about CRM. We're not going to talk about EASA standards. Yes, we are going to talk about EASA standards. Because for us, it was really strange when we were in Moscow. We were talking about EASA standards. What? Really? Yeah. Okay. How much time do we have?
How much time do you need?
Yeah, what our plan was actually was to get you guys up, change some seats, and talk to each other about what you have, what your experience is on cultural differences, and share it with each other. If you think it's a organizational difference or a real cultural difference from a nationality, then tell each other, because we don't talk about it that often, right? We just don't do, and give each other some best practice. And to maybe we'll just do that, right?
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah. We'll give you the last inspiration, because I see some eyes closing. Here we go.
Go to the party. I went to a white disco recently, and I watched white people dance. Y'all can't dance. No, I'm not being racist. I mean, it's just like saying black people have thick lips, and that's not racist. It's true. We have thick lips, and white people can't dance. And y'all be trying. Y'all be really. Do y'all listen to the words or the beat? Cause y'all be, and I really, I say, I'm telling you, every time you see a black, when you ever go to a white club, when you're in a white club, you see like 5 or 6 brothers just there, you hear, one of those niggas in here. They watching y'all dance. Look at these crazy motherfuckers. Y'all got one dance y'all can do. Y'all can do this shit like this. But y'all don't do no moves, it's just this. Y'all do some shit like this. You be fucked up. Love shit, actually. And why do y'all step on each other's feet? Brothers, we go to disco, get all fucked up, you're stepping and hitting, and brothers got some dance, they be doing some shit like this with their heads, some shit like that. If white people do that, they'll kill each other. Alright. Let's stick with this.
Okay, so that's it. Wij zullen het doen hier of zullen we het buiten proberen? Maakt mij niet uit. Okay, let's just go outside, guys, and divide in groups and find different nationalities, right? Different organizations, and it's and let's be back in 5:35, so 10 minutes. Guys, excuse me, 1 second. So, if you guys come back in 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you, or you're going to ask yourself these 2 questions about this presentation, because it's the first time we do this for FSC. What sticks and will you remember next week? Just make that note for yourself. And what are you going to apply next time that you're in the simulator or in the classroom? And you can put it on a note and give it to us, so we have feedback to improve for next time. But I might challenge some of you guys and say, okay, so what about these questions? Yeah, so go out there, divide, and back in 10 minutes. Okay.
Niks te doen.
People who are actually what we're going to do is we're going to give them guidance and tell them, give them a handout of CPT, what's in there. Just tell them what's in the exercise.
Oh, nee. Ja, die staat erop hoor. Die staat erop hoor.
Ja, het gaat viral.
Okay, guys. Maybe had a little group discussion. So, can I have some answers? What sticks from this presentation?
I'm going to nominate Paul Penel.
Thanks, Kevin.
You or him?
Oh, he's giving me a chance to speak up. Actually, we had an interesting discussion, and we were sort of recognizing the example about the company in Moscow training on the Embraer, a big Russian customer, getting in co-pilots, well, probably just to fly as a co-pilot. But what was a big problem there was that we already had a language problem with the guys coming in. So it's difficult to see the cultural differences if you don't even share the same language, if you don't speak the same language. So, we wanted to see if FSC, because you were asking FSC, well, how can we improve the information to the instructors to improve the entry level of the students speaking the same language. So now we can actually communicate together and find out more about the cultural differences. If we don't speak the same language, that's even more difficult, right? To find out, to get the right answers from those guys. If you ask open questions and they don't answer, then how would we as instructors or examiners find out what they think, what they feel, what they believe? So we were discussing that, and furthermore, what sticks in my mind is try not to be prejudiced and always go into training and also examining with an open mind. Try to set an open atmosphere is what I try to do, just in order to show respect to their background or their culture or where they're from. So, and that's what's going to stick with me from the presentation.
Yeah, and again, hopefully if you're aware of it, you can stay away from it.
Yeah.
But we all do it. I mean, there's no way in hell that you can quit your brain with stereotyping or profiling. We all do that.
Yeah.
But you have to be aware of it. And for me, with the 3 circles, that's for me the trick. And see one digress or 2 digress, then okay, what's going on here? Why is it digressing from the reality? Ja, Jan.
Ja, wat ik zei ook van CRM, ja,
English, Jan. There's a language problem here.
It's always the same.
I rest my case. But you were talking about CRM only if the opdrachtgever, the customer requires it. But we talked about only making an observation, for example, rejected takeoff and somebody forgets the speed brake. Saying, okay, this is the rejected takeoff, speed brake is forgotten, period. It's very, it's a very naked observation. But what you can do is always raise the issue, not answering the question, but saying, could you have done something about it? And then leave it at the chemical.
What I actually did was
there's a simple solution to the speed brake problem. If these guys have a problem with the speed brake, they have to change the aircraft type, because on the Airbus they come out automatically.
And then we're going to talk about automation in business. No, but I actually got one tip in the old days, and that was the guy said to me, ask them if the speed brake was forgotten. Ask them what happened. And then you might find out that either left or right pilot has seen, but not saying anything. And then you also know about, oh, maybe there is something else playing. But always ask what they've seen, then give your observation, and then ask for a solution. That's, yeah. Anything else?
Well, I was just telling my friends here that yesterday I was on the simulator with 2 brothers. We did the training at the same time at the same school. One went to Lion Air and is flying as a captain for 5 years, and the other went to Ryanair and now flying for a captain 6 years. And they came together on the 7-8 for an experience flight. And they were totally different personalities. I'm talking about their captaincy, the way they handle authority, completely different. Same family, same culture. So 10 years, whatever, in a company, paint them red or green, whatever color it is. So if you bring crews together with different backgrounds, talking about the same Russian company again, they bring crews together from very old places. So even though they appear to be Caucasus people, they're still very different.
Yeah.
And that's to do with individual experience, but also age. 20-year-old, 25-year-old is completely different than a 50-year-old, etc., etc. So looking at your 3 circles, the realization is that it's going to be very hard, without becoming a CRM instructor, to talk about these, bringing these 3 circles together. Whatever you do, your circle towards them, or their circles towards each other, or whatever movement is needed. Unless of course you get the, let's say, the request by a company to invest in CRM.
Yeah.
If you do bare type qualification, you're going to be, especially when you have more instructors on the same crew, you're going to be running into this situation every session more or less.
But the thing is, I assume that we all want to give the best instruction we can, right? And the thing is that that's why I said, what can FSC do, what can you do, or the trainee do? If you would have known before, right? This is how Lion Air operates, this is how Ryanair operates, this is how Martin or KLM operates, then you already know. It doesn't matter what kind of personalities, this is something different, but then you know there's 2 different cultures or organizational cultures coming in and I'm bringing them together, then you know that you got your work cut out for yourself, because that's an issue. That's an issue if Jan says, make them the best cooperating 2 captains in the cockpit, then you might need more briefing time, more simulators, whatever. Right? But if you don't know it and you think, now you have two captains, this is going to be great, and it's not great, then
I'm not saying anything about, I'm not judging it. but
No.
Observing 4 hours with briefing 6 hours, there were completely different people, same mother, same school, same everything. Genetically, what is identity from companies and their experience background in the Eastern environment and European environment.
That's true. But then we're talking about organizational cultural differences, yes, and that's as important as that. But for us as instructors, it doesn't matter where the difference comes from, but we need to know it, and preferably we would like to know it beforehand. Yeah?
You're putting a bit of emphasis on FSA providing the information. Surely on that first session when you meet with them at the briefing, that first 5 or 10 minutes, the introduction that you're having and giving, just like everyone's done at the lectures today, except it's been one way, you've been giving us, we haven't been giving you. That two-way conversation, that's where you're trying to build up a background for the cultures that you're dealing with. All the bubbles within the bubbles of culture, masculine, feminine, colour of skin, colour, shape of eyes, where were you trained, where were you born, where did you go to school. In that first 5 minutes, when you're chatting with the two trainees you're about to train, that becomes such an important time to try and draw on what the cultures are, the cultural differences, the cultural being organisational, country, language, whatever. That's such an important time, that first 5 or 10 minutes that you're talking to the two people you're about to train.
Yeah, great.
I totally agree, yeah. I totally agree. And
maybe we don't put enough as trainers. We don't put enough emphasis on that. We want to get stuck into the box ticking exercises and
very instrumental sometimes.
Yeah, get on with the task. Because the end product is we're going in that simulator and you're going to pull the speed brake or you're not going to pull the speed brake. We're not focusing on who are these people that we're about to go in there and deal with.
No, so I think that's a danger also then assume that this person you're speaking to is experienced and face-to-face. You've already made a judgment then without even seeing them. But I think it's a double-edged sword then. You have to be careful.
it is true, but the thing is that if you don't ask the question,
no, you're quite right.
Yeah.
So
if you don't know, if the guy has had a military background, you might make the assumption you're correct, that he's not going to take well to commercial authority gradients that are less steep. But at least that gives you a starting point. Yeah. If you then pick up that the person is being too authoritative in the cockpit, you can go, okay, well maybe it's because of his military background. It might not be. It might be because he had a mother or a father who was very authoritative. But at least you've got to start somewhere. Otherwise, you're just taking two people, throwing them into a briefing, and then into the sim, and making all the wrong assumptions at the end of it.
And then you go from diversity to inclusiveness.
Correct.
Yeah. JP. Okay, guys, I don't want to roll the program, but we're 15 minutes late, so they're already looking for their lunch. So if you can put us to a nice end, JP. And I think that's good for days and days. It's fine. It's okay. Yeah, we can close it up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up, guys. Karin just approached me outside and she said, and I knew that this question would be coming. The goal that Chaco and I and Han talked about is to give you the top layer of cultural differences, right? And I know you guys are, like me, very pragmatic. What do I do now in the simulator exactly? So I think that's for the next, for the future we're going to see, or FSA is going to see what they're going to do with it. Right, but the intention was to give you a general idea that there is issues, and that if you go to this website, it will give you very nice information. It is really interesting. How are these people accepting my teacher or training skills or not, for example? how do they accept power distance. So I hope you can do something with it, and FSC is going to follow on this. Okay?
Can you show the website one more time, please? On the slide.
Okay, AP, and I'll thank you so much for this presentation. We're about 50 minutes late, so originally we should have started the afternoon program at 13:30, will be 13:45 in the breakout rooms on the right hand side. Outside there will be a shield, which type it is. Yes, we have 5 breakout rooms, 747, 76 together, and it's 777, 78 is also together. We'll be there at 13:45, and once more, guys, so much food for thought. And I think for the next year, 2020, we might have a very interesting. Thank you.